Hello and welcome to the WTF Podcast with the Flow. My name is Stefany Babain and I'm here to help answer all of your WTF questions when it comes to all things related to spirituality, mindset, and the metaphysical. I'll answer your what the F, who the F, where the F, when the F, why the F, and even though it doesn't start with a W, the occasional how the F questions that you might have upon entering the world of personal development and embarking on a spiritual journey. Ultimately, my hope and intention is that at the end of every single episode, you leave smiling and understanding a little bit more about yourself and how to live a happier life in the flow with this miraculous, infinitely expanding, all-loving universe that we all call home. I love you. Let's effing do this. Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the first ever official episode of the WTF Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me and clicking on this link and exploring what this podcast is about. As I already mentioned, my name is Stefany Babain, and I feel like it's only fitting that the title of this first episode is What the F is this podcast about and who the F am I? So, to start off, who the F am I? Well, I call myself a mental wealth coach. So I help women who are experiencing burnout and anxiety and loneliness. I help them ditch those feelings so that they can start living a life of joy, a life where they can enjoy their own company and feel more confident. I am also a 200-hour certified yoga teacher. I learned something called trauma-informed yoga. I am a Reiki Master Teacher. And I have also worked with children for a majority of my life. If you don't know what any of those things are, don't worry. I will create episodes on what the F those things are. I am also the mommy of 3 fur babies, 2 cats, Reggie and Martin. He's French. That's his name, Martin. And a beautiful little beagle named Bellaroo. I'm a huge animal lover. And what the F this podcast is about is it's really an idea that I got, I want to say like 2 years ago, somewhere in COVID. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think I was 100% sober when I got this idea. But the point is that I got the idea. And I've been sitting on it because of a lot of different reasons. Not knowing how to start a podcast, not feeling like anyone would want to hear my message. And I finally just decided, what the F? I'm just going to go ahead and do it because it's been nagging me. And if that's already resonating with you, if there's something that you have been wanting to start that's been nagging you and you haven't started yet, maybe take this as a sign to just go ahead and do it. And know that it's not going to be perfect right away and that it might be messy and suck in the beginning, but it's going to get better over time. And that's kind of how I am seeing this podcast and introducing this podcast. You know, I actually started recording an episode right before this and some dogs started barking. And so I'm praying that doesn't happen again. This podcast really is designed or intended to help anyone that's begun to open up spiritually and enter the world of personal development. When I first got into spirituality and personal development, I kind of went really up until recently in like a smorgasbord of healing modalities and mentors and guides and books and really anything that I thought would help fix me. Because what ends up happening when you start to open up spiritually and work on yourself is you start to face a lot of things that you didn't necessarily want to face before. It can be really emotionally challenging when you're seeking change and facing things about yourself and in your life that you don't really like. So this podcast is, for one thing, kind of meant to be like a very broken down spirituality and mindset for dummies, but also to help anyone that's listening feel supported and validated on their journey. Know that you are exactly where you're meant to be and you are not alone, and your story is your story. Your mess is your message. My mess is my message. And so during this podcast, I'm going to be sharing a lot of my own personal stories. And really, that's going to be healing in itself for me, to express my authentic truth in hopes that the person hearing it, that you hearing it, knows that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be truthful. And maybe somewhere in my story, you hear the exact guidance that you need. Another thing that I really want to emphasize about this podcast, if you couldn't tell by the name, is that it's really not meant to be taken too seriously. I really do my best not to take life too seriously. And what I think can end up happening, again, if you are anything like me, is when you start learning about mindset and learning about spiritual practices, things can get really serious really fast. And you can end up accidentally start pushing away the things that make you sparkle, the things that make you shine. Because, and we'll get into this a little bit later, when you start focusing on the way that you speak and the way that you think, there can almost be this like paranoia of like, oh my God, I thought this, or like, oh my God, I said this, like I fucked up. I need to be like more disciplined. And you start like, noticing things in other people, noticing the way that they're speaking. And so you suddenly start to feel maybe a little bit superior or holier than thou. And you're like, oh my God, this person's so negative and like they think this way. And you want to correct them. You want to shake them and wake them up because you've had an awakening. And I'm only saying this because I've done it and because I have seen it, and I'm not shaming anyone by any means. This is just something that I feel is worth saying. I think it's important because spirituality, I think it needs to be more relatable. I think it's kind of like a buzzword. I feel like there's this stigma centered around the word, and maybe it's tied with religion or with like the image of a barefoot hippie, which, I mean, frankly, honestly, I do walk barefoot all the time and I will make an episode about that. But my point is that at the root of all things when it comes to living a spiritual life is to live as your most authentic self. And so you're the only one that's going to know what that looks like. You're the only one that can say if you are living authentically or not. And people will notice that. People will read that in your energy. You can pretty much tell when a person is faking it or not. But when we get more into, which I will explain, your authentic self, I'm talking about the you that is living the life that you truly want, doing the things that you really want. Not worrying about what other people are doing, not worrying about what's on the outside, but focusing on you, on where you want to go, how you want to feel, how you want to think, loving yourself, trusting yourself, and knowing that who you are is so much greater than you might be giving yourself credit for. I'm always going to do my best to emphasize what a miracle life is and what a miracle you are to even exist. And just know that when I'm reminding you, I'm also reminding myself, because as I shared with you earlier, it took me a long time to do this podcast. It took me a long time to start even believing just a little bit that I am worthy of success and that I am enough. The reason that I decided that I want to be a coach is because when I started learning about this information, I was just like shocked. I was shocked that I didn't learn this in school. I was shocked that I didn't know this before, because it's literally life. Like, yeah, we go to school and we learn things, but the stuff that I intend on teaching in this podcast, it's about the universe. It's about existence itself. And I am not saying that I'm an expert. I will be learning with you. I will be researching. And anytime that I learn something new, I will be sharing it with you. And I will be reinforcing that information in me. And I will be doing my very best to practice what I preach, because that's something that I've also done in the past. I did that kind of a reverse. I practiced a lot, but didn't really feel like preaching. And then I kind of became a preacher, but not a practicer. And so this is me taking the first right step in doing both. when I first got into spirituality and personal development and mindset, right before lockdown, I was working 3 jobs. 3 jobs. I was a personal trainer, I was a preschool teacher, and I was a behavioral therapist. I did a form of therapy called ABA, which stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis, meaning I worked with children mostly on the spectrum, helping them live more self-sufficient lives. And what I think is so cool about the fact that I did all those 3 jobs, even though I was exhausted and miserable and would literally cry in my car while driving because I was just like so unhappy with my life. And I felt like I had to work so much to make a living, but ended up having no time for myself. What I ultimately learned afterwards, when I was forced into quarantine and went from doing, out of the house from 5:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. to like all this time to myself, is that I got to learn so much, for one thing, about human behavior. And for another, I was guided to become a yoga teacher. I was guided to become a Reiki teacher. All those experiences that I had, I was meant to have them. They were preparing me for who it is that I am becoming in this very moment. Me becoming a yoga teacher, I became a yoga teacher because the gym that I was a personal trainer at for, I want to say literally like 2 or 3 months, was across from the yoga studio that I took my first class at. And I learned about Reiki because I decided I wanted to go to an animal sanctuary. I didn't know what Reiki was, to be honest. And again, I will explain what Reiki is in another episode, but I didn't even know what Reiki was. I was just like, animals. And I went and I ended up becoming a Reiki Master Teacher. And so I guess what I'm saying in this rant and this ramble and this kind of tangent is that you have absolutely no idea what experience you're having right now may lead to in the future. You have absolutely no idea. All that I can tell you and encourage you to do is really do your best to soak up every moment, even if the moment that you're in right now is sucking and you wish that something were different. Ask yourself this question every single time that you can: is what is this teaching me? What can I learn from this? What can I take from this experience? Those questions are so powerful. And if you just start creating the habit of asking yourself that, you will start to gain more clarity. Ultimately, I believe Steve Jobs said this. My mentor always says this. And so I'm going to say it to you: is you can only ever connect the dots looking backwards. And so I am connecting the dots looking backwards. What's interesting about my story is that I was like on this huge high when I first started out. I was like working out, I was meditating every day, I was doing everything. But I also had so much time at home. I was very blessed. I was very blessed that I was one of the people in COVID who did not have to worry about working. I was getting paid at the time. And so I was just like living my best life. But what ended up happening when things started to open up was I didn't end up maintaining those habits because I actually wasn't creating sustainable habits for myself. Yes, I had a routine that I loved. And again, I'm so thankful because it was during a time where a lot of people were suffering. And so I don't mean to sound insensitive by any means to anyone who was going through a difficult time in COVID. But I also do want to speak to the people who did, pursue a path of personal development in COVID. I feel like a lot of people discovered their passions and their dreams. And I think part of the struggle was even that, is that everyone was forced to sit at home and face their stuff, to really look at their life and see it for what it is. And so for some people, that was a really difficult thing. And of course, for some other people, money was a scary thing, or you were living with someone who wasn't easy to live with. My point is that COVID was a really big transitional time for all of us. And so coming back into life, into this new normal, was shocking. And for me, it was shocking. And I went from like a super big high to kind of collapsing under all the pressure that I put on myself to maintain the image that I'd created for myself, the habits that I'd created for myself. And really, it became actually one of the most challenging years of my life because I missed a lot of who I was becoming. I felt like I was grieving the version of me that I thought was perfect, that had finally figured everything out, and really put the brakes on my life. I put the brakes on my life. I stopped taking action. And the biggest thing that I learned was that the love that I had for myself was conditional. That was the biggest thing that I had to face, was that it was so easy to love myself when I looked a certain way, when I was making a certain amount of money. But when all of that was stripped away, when all of that was taken away, suddenly I no longer loved myself. Suddenly I no longer had the time of day for me. Suddenly I was so unkind to myself. And that is not love. That is conditional love. What I want to really express to you, and will always emphasize in this podcast, the one main thing that you need to know on your spiritual journey is that the only thing that is real in this life is love. Whether you are believing in energy, the universe, God, source energy, whatever you want to call it. And again, that will be another episode. Whatever created you, it created you with love. Unconditional, unwavering love. And so I hope that you learn how to love yourself in the same way. And I can tell you for sure that is something that I am working on, and I will always be as transparent and as authentic as I can about where I'm at. I will never pretend to be somebody that I'm not to you. I will never pretend that I am superior or that I have everything figured out. I'm figuring out this life too. And maybe I'm a few steps ahead as far as knowing things, but again, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And if there's any kind of information that I can give to you that's going to help you on your path and also simultaneously reinforce mine, like, heck yeah, I'm going to do that. Also, on a random side note, I just want to share something that I think is so funny. And this is completely such a tangent from the deep thing that I just said. I thought I was really creative with the name of this podcast. And I named it partially because, I feel like something that I say so often is like, what the fuck? And this, I will curse often, I promise. I think it's in poor taste, but there's so many times in my life I'll just be like, what the fuck, man? And so I just I love play on words. I love alliterations. Like if I can have two words start with the same letter, I'm like all for it. But so basically I came up with that name because I've also been someone known to go with the flow for the most part in life. And I didn't really know what that meant until now. And so I will explain that in the next episode. But I thought it was so funny because I thought I was so creative with coming up with this name. And it turns out there are at least two other podcasts that I saw with the name. And one of them is about periods. So it's actually really clever in my opinion, the period one. That being said, if you clicked on this podcast hoping to learn about periods, this is not the podcast for that. Maybe I'll do an episode on one. Who knows? I go with the flow. But for now, I'm going to say, go check the other one out. So I'm going to go ahead and use this beautiful moment to end here and just leave you with that one little piece of wisdom, not the period one, but to start learning to love yourself unconditionally. And I really sincerely look forward to making more episodes like this and growing this podcast and getting better at it. And I'm so grateful to be a part of your journey. And I am so grateful for you choosing to listen and hopefully continue listening as I work really hard to put some value out there. And I just know that I'm always coming from a place of love, and I'm just wanting to give. I just want to give, and I hope that what I'm giving is exactly what you need. I hope that you're smiling right now. And if not, see if you can try to force one, because your brain will eventually start reacting to the smile. Not toxic positivity, though. I love you so freaking much. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, that you start learning how to live a little bit more in the flow, and that you start knowing just how truly amazing and loved you are. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of the WTF Podcast. I hope that you gained all kinds of value from listening and that your WTF question was answered. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow me on Instagram at Coach Stefany B. If you have a WTF question of your own, or you have any interest in working one-on-one with me, then feel free to send me a private message. And when it comes to your question, I'll do my best to answer it either here or privately. In the meantime, until the next episode, I'm wishing you the most wonderful day, the most wonderful week, and reminding you to smile and then see if you can make somebody else smile. Until next time.